Hello and welcome back with Mrs. Struble. Today we're going to discuss finding unknown angle measures. In this video, we're going to learn how to use basic angle relationships in order to find missing angle measures. We're also going to learn how to identify a pair of angles as adjacent, supplementary, complementary, or even vertical angles. Before we get started, let's cover some angle basics. Our different types of basic angles, singular angles, are a right angle, which has 90 degrees exactly. We have an acute angle, or less than 90 degrees, obtuse angle, and this one, it's a little less common. It's called our reflex angle. And a reflex angle is an angle that is greater than 180 degrees. And 180 and 90 degrees, or 90 and 180. Okay. Continuing with our angle basics, we also have different ways that we name an angle. I'm going to show you 3 different ways. The first way that an angle can be named is using 3 capital letters. An angle is formed when we have 3 dots like so. In this example, the 3 dots can be utilized in order to identify what specific angle we're talking about or referring to. One example would be if I was discussing angle A, B, E. Notice that they're all capital letters. That is reference to the angle that goes from A to the vertex B and back to E. This angle right here. Another way we can name angles is by using numbers. Using this same diagram, I can number the angles within it. So angle 1 is referring to this angle right here, whereas angle 3 refers to this angle opposite of it. And then the final way in which we can name angles is by using lowercase letters in place of the numbers. So rather than the numbers, we could put lowercase letters within the angle area itself, like you see here. So angle D, if I said angle D, again lowercase angle D, I am referencing this obtuse angle right here. So those are angle basics. Now let's get into the angle relationships for this section. Adjacent angles are angles that share a common ray. An example here would be angle 3 and angle 4. Again, these are angle relationship pairs. So we're looking at either 2 or more angles when we're talking about an angle relationship. So if you notice, angle 3 and angle 4 share the common ray N, which makes them adjacent angles. There's many more adjacent angles in this diagram, but we're just going to do one quick example of each. Vertical angles are angles opposite of each other and are formed when 2 lines intersect. Okay? Once again, looking at this diagram over here, we have line L and line M intersect each other. One pair of vertical angles that is formed from that intersection is angle 2 and angle 5. they are opposite of each other. So angle 2 and angle 5 is an example of a vertical angle relationship. An important thing to know about vertical angles is that they are congruent. And we use this symbol right here to note congruency, or equal in measure. Complementary angles are angles whose measure adds up to 90 degrees. For example, then I could identify this right here as a 90 degree. Once that happens, or we identify it by a little box, once we see that, then we can see that the two angles that add up to that 90 degree are angle 4 and angle 5. Supplementary angles are angles whose sum is 180 degrees. Okay. And we got a really good example right here. Remember, 180 degrees is straight line. So we would say that angle 2 and angle 1 are supplementary angles. They add up to 180 degrees. Now we're going to practice first naming angles. Okay. Looking at this diagram, we're going to identify a pair of adjacent angles, a pair of complementary angles, a pair of supplementary angles, and a pair of vertical angles. Okay. Notice that this diagram has points with capital letters. In order to name an angle, we're going to have to use the angle symbol and then 3 letters. The middle letter being B, the middle of this diagram, or the vertex of these angles here. Okay. So an adjacent angle, remember, is a pair of angles that share a common ray. There are definitely multiple answers here, but one example would be angle ABF and angle FBE. So following along, we're talking about this angle and this angle. They share this common ray. So they're adjacent. Complementary angles. Angles that add up to 90 degrees. We see a right angle right here. So that informs us that our pair of complementary angles are angle EBD and angle CBD. We could also call this angle DBC. It doesn't matter as long as D, B, and C are the 3 letters with B in the middle. Okay? So we're talking about DBC and EBD, these 2 angles. Okay, supplementary angles add up to 180 degrees, or a straight line. So we're looking for a straight line, and we see one right there. 2 angles that help form that straight line are angle FBA and angle ABC. So we're talking about this angle, this acute angle right here, and this obtuse angle. Together, they equal that 180 degrees that we're looking for. Finally, vertical angles. Okay? Vertical angles are formed when 2 lines intersect. So I see this line and I see this line intersecting each other. And they are opposite of each other. So we're looking at right here and right here. Those are what we call vertical angles. Naming those angles now. again, this one and this one, we have angle FBA or ABF, doesn't either way, and angle DBC. Okay. Now let's practice finding missing measures. First, classify the pair of angles, then use that knowledge to help find the missing value. In this first diagram, we have vertical angles. We know vertical angles are congruent, therefore 70 is equal to x. Well, that means x is 70 degrees. So is that x is equal to 70. That one's an easy one. In this second diagram, we have two angles, and we notice that there is a right angle right here. So two angles add up to 90 degrees. That's what we call complementary angles. One way to remember this is, I always like to say it's the right thing to give a complement, okay? And a right angle is 90 degrees. So that's one way to remember it. So now we know that these two angles added together are equal to 90 degrees. We can set up an equation to help us solve. So adding these two angles together, we have 31, oops, let me try that better, plus x plus 4 equals 90 degrees. Combining like terms, we have 31 plus 4, that's 35, plus x equals 90. Continuing to solve for x, we're going to subtract 35 from both sides. And we get x is equal to, 55. Oops. And we're just going to say 55, not 55 degrees, because x is not the degree. It's just part of an expression that gives us the degree value. Taking a look at this third diagram, we have two angles that form a straight angle, or in other words, 180 degrees. That again is what we call supplementary angles. So these are a pair of supplementary angles, which means they add up to 180 degrees. So once again, we can form our equation, and I'm going to put the equation up here in order to help us solve a missing value. So we have x plus this angle, which is x minus 4. Those added together are equal to 180 degrees. Combining like terms, we see two x's, so that's 2x. X plus x is 2x. Minus 4 equals 180. We're going to add 4 to each side. That goes away. We end up with 2x is equal to 176, which means divide both sides by 2. X is equal to 88. And that's how we would use our angle relationships to find missing angle measures. Now, let's have you give this a try. Pause the video, try the 4 problems. Now that you've tried these 4 problems, let's go over the answers. So for number 1, just make sure that the adjacent pair that you named shares a common side. So you have two angles that share that common side. Complementary angles. Thankfully, there's only one pair of complementary angles in this diagram. We have PJN and NJM. Those are the complementary pair. The supplementary pair, now there's several of these as well. Okay, I could say PJN and then NJL, this obtuse and then this acute. Or I could say PJM and MJL, those two right angles. And there's a couple more here. I could go and take a look at, hey, here's a straight line, so two angles that form that one. Okay. Once again, for supplementary angles, just make sure we're adding up to a straight line. And then vertical angles, There's several in here as well. These two right here are vertical angles. Okay. Then we have these two are vertical angles. And lastly, we have these two angles are vertical angles. Okay. Today we've discussed how to use angle relationships to help find missing angle measures, and also practice how to identify those angle relationships by using the adjacent, supplementary, complementary, or vertical angle vocabulary. Thank you for joining me, Mrs. Struble with Struble Math.